The worship theme this month is courage. Showing up today to be together is itself an act of courage. We gather to learn and to reflect on how we can live into our best selves, to face difficult and joyful parts of our lives, and to find our purpose. We are a community with strong connections and endeavor to always be open to having new people join us. Good morning to all of you, old friends and new, who've joined us in person and by Zoom. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. You are welcome just as you are. I am Lisa Anderson and will serve as your worship associate. The co-creators of this service include in part our musicians, Jacqueline Chasen, Gretchen Frazier, Bill Braun, Christopher Grundy, and the choir. Thank you to all of you. Now for a few announcements. If you're visiting us for the first time or perhaps are new enough to USNH and you have questions about Unitarian Universalism and our congregation, you can join us today in the library, which is upstairs. It's that large room on the right where we will be having our monthly visitors chat right after the service. It's sponsored by our Connections team, which was formerly known as our membership team. Lurleen has an announcement she wants to share about the early voting referendum. Lurleen.
So, almost 60 years ago, UU Minister James Reeb was martyred at the Selma March. And then he was eulogized by Martin Luther King, who eulogized him rather than going to Congress, where President Johnson brought the Voting Rights Act to the Congress. Today, as a people of faith who affirm justice and equity in our relationships and the democratic process in society, we too are called to work for electoral justice. The USNH UU The Vote team is working with many partners in our state to pass the Connecticut early voting referendum. Because the current one-day voting system disproportionately affects people that are Black and brown in our state because work schedules, transportation complexities, and childcare challenges. After today's service, please see us in the social hall and learn more about the early voting referendum that will be on your ballots this fall. Learn more so that you can help spread the word on this important civil rights initiative. Nationally, we're partnered with the Center for Common Ground to reach out to BIPOC voters in southern states. Currently, we're postcard writing to North Carolina to help folks counteract the negative impact of redistricting on people of color in their state. Come today to the postcard writing party in the social hall, or you can pick up a packet of cards to write at home. I know this feels close to the last postcard writing, but it's October and the election is only 5 weeks away. We really need you. The people in the South need you, and BIPOC folks in our state need you. Thank you.
Now, let us make sure we've turned off our devices or put them into worship mode and settle into the service.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Linda Susan. My pronouns are they, them, and I proudly serve this congregation as its minister.
Es ahora que estamos llamados a ser testigos del mundo, a enmendarlo, a cambiar su curso, a restaurarlo.
It is now when we are called as witnesses of the world to mend it, to change its course, to restore it.
Es ahora que somos llamados a vivir nuestros valores, a no escondernos, a no temer, sino a ser audaces y a hacer ruido.
It is now when we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud.
Es ahora que somos llamados a continuar nuestra lucha por la justicia, a organizarnos, a levantar las voces.
It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up.
Es ahora. Reunamos, démonos valor unos a otros, celebramos.
It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage. Let us worship.
Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all there is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise.
Let's try it this way. Here we go. Covenant lies at the center of how Unitarian Universalists gather in community. We are united not by a particular set of beliefs, but by the promises we make about how we will be together, how we will treat each other, and how we will seek to mend relationships when we fall short of our aspirations. For a while now, we've recited our covenant in a way that gives an overview of everything we promise each other. For the next several weeks, though, we're going to focus each week on one element in its entirety. Today, we'll speak aloud our promise to work with conflict. So please join me in reciting the words that appear in italics in your order of service or in the chat on the live stream. Together, let us say, we covenant together to create and nurture a culture of respect and kindness, and to engage in the spiritual and everyday practice of loving more generously. To this end, we will strive in part to work with conflict, addressing differences with honesty and compassion, requesting support when needed, making and receiving authentic apologies, and being willing to forgive.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing number 184, Be Ye Lamps Unto Yourselves. We'll hear Dr. Brown play it once for us, and then we'll sing it through 3 times together.
Monique and Elena, were born in the same town, grew up in the same town. They had crossed paths occasionally, but most of the time they were just living their lives on their own side of things. When an issue arose that required a vote in the town, they found themselves on opposite sides of it. Monique felt very strongly one way, Elena felt very strongly the other way. And when an action, a march, a protest was organized, there was Monique at the head of one side of it. And there was Elena at the head of the other side of it. Monique raised her sign and marched absolutely with her head held high, yelling, singing, shouting, living her truth. But when Elena showed up on the other side of the street with her own sign saying that we were the ones who were right or left or whichever one, that she was the one marching down the street, and they began singing and shouting and talking about how they were the ones who knew the truth. And so things began to elevate. Elena's side of the street began to shout and yell louder. And something weird happened. They began to leave that realm where they were talking about the thing that they cared about, and they started saying some things about the people on the other side of the street, using some not very friendly words to describe them. And on the other side of the street, where Monique was, she began to do the same thing, shouting things that were less about the issue and more about the people on the other side. Things got louder, things got more tense, and at one moment, Monique started to cross the street, and as she was shouting out things that I would never ever repeat in this space, she tripped and fell down in the middle of the road. And Elena saw her chance. She left her side and came over. She approached Monique, who was down on the ground with a little scrape on her knee, and Elena reached behind her and she pulled out a Band-Aid and some Neosporin. And she knelt down and she said, "Can I help you with that?" Because something amazing had happened in Elena's mind as that fracas was getting worse and worse on both sides. She remembered her principles. And even though she had a principle that said everyone should have a voice and a vote, she also had a principle that said every person has worth and dignity. She had another principle that says everyone deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. And she knew that in her faith tradition and in her personal beliefs, that even though there are ideas, principles, values that stand by themselves, they never are completely by themselves. In fact, they are woven together. And it is so important that when we are focusing on one of our principles, one of our values, that we don't forget the others. It may manifest, it may come out in something as simple as looking at somebody who's on the opposite side of an issue as you and offering them a Band-Aid when they fall down. Because you know what? At the end of this story, after Monique had that Band-Aid on her knee and Elena had hers, they both went back to their sides of the street. and they kept fighting for what they believed was right. But the volume was just a little bit lower. I invite any children and young people who are with us this morning to now come out to their classes. We are mostly inside today, except for kindergarten and second grade, kindergarten through second grade. So kindergarten through second grade, out to the front lawn, everyone else upstairs with me. And Christopher is going to lead us in a song to sing our children on.
The unabated sorrows of this world, war, violence, forced migration, climate change surround us. But now let us lift up the people and communities whose lives have been upended and radically altered by Hurricane Ian. Let us also stand in solidarity and in love with the Iranian protesters in their fight for women's rights. Here we hold Manya Liss and her family in our hearts as Manya's mother was placed in hospice care this week. Together, let us give thanks for this community of care.
The spoken meditation today will actually be spoken and sung. So I invite you to join me in number 1037 in the Teal hymnal. This is called We Begin Again in Love. The words are by my mentor and friend who died a few months ago. I will speak the narrator part, and Bill will play as we all sing together the refrain. Actually, could you play the refrain first? For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness that set us apart and alone. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. for falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. Let us hold together a moment of silence.
In many ways, our offerings to this community are acts of courage. We break the taboos about not talking about money and use it instead as a tool to support our values. Each contribution we make is like a ripple in a pond. Our stone is what we can give, large or small, and all stones ripple together and spread and create impacts beyond which we cannot even imagine. You can contribute through our website at usnh.org, or you can mail in a contribution to our physical address at 700 Hartford Turnpike, Hamden, Connecticut. And there will also be offering plates near the exits where you can place your offering at the end of the service. Thanks for your generosity. like it has become easy for us to occupy our rage without moving into action. And it's become easy for us to get angry and self-righteous without really asking what is needed in that moment. What if what's needed isn't sexy, intimidating, violent? And what if what is needed is forgiveness? The kind of forgiveness that seems unimaginable, miraculous, holy, unattainable, like forgiving those who hurt you, hate you, building relationships with those who kill your children. What if what is necessary is trusting people beyond their mistakes and shortcomings, trusting their best intentions? Are we strong enough to default to trust at a community level? What if what is necessary is learning to see family where you've seen enemies? What is necessary is not strategy, not plans, not dollars, just unconditional love.
See if any of this sounds familiar. There's this thing you suspect is true. The knowledge is somewhat uncomfortable, and you're not sure what to do with it. You sidle up to it, test the waters, then dart back to the place where you were more or less able to ignore it. Or you walk up to it boldly, plan to stare it down, and then realize, nope, you're still not ready to deal with it. You try it on for size again. Is this really true? Is there any wiggle room that will let you avoid what you've come to know? And eventually you acknowledge that it isn't going to go away, and that you're going to have to find a way to incorporate this truth into your life, your identity, your worldview. You exhale. You may feel daunted by the implications of this newly accepted truth, but you also find liberation in that acceptance. That's what the process of courage has often been like for me, at least. Awareness, fear, deep breathing, acceptance, action, liberation. As I've strengthened my courage muscles over the years, I've generally been able to shorten the time frame and diminish the intensity, but it's still a process. And yes, the fear or discomfort remains a necessary ingredient in summoning courage. If we weren't afraid of something, we wouldn't need to be courageous, would we? We'd go right from awareness to action. Ah, the mail has arrived. I shall collect the mail. Of course, if you're worried about receiving bad news, even that scenario isn't so simple. Having the courage to show up can take many forms. Coming out with an identity somewhere under the LGBTQ+ umbrella, which is a way of showing up as your true self, takes courage, even under the best of circumstances. When I came out as bisexual way back in college, I was fortunate because I had several queer housemates, including folks who identified as bi. And when I started to realize that I'm non-binary, the thing that took the longest before I came out was figuring out the language that best described me. I use the term gender dynamic for those following along. And even though I accepted my gender identity fairly easily, it still takes me courage to ask people to use they, them pronouns. I don't always do it. Speaking your truth in other ways can require courage too. How often have you shared your spiritual beliefs with someone in this congregation? And not just general values like justice and compassion, but your particular practices and beliefs about the nature of the universe. Perhaps you've talked about them in small group ministry or while teaching a religious education class. Then again, maybe you held back even there. When it comes to discussing what we hold sacred, the stakes can feel really high. The stakes can also feel high whenever you hear a remark that you know isn't okay. We've all been in this situation at one time or another. Maybe it happened in line at the grocery store. Maybe it was at Christmas dinner. Maybe it was on a bus. What did you do? And I don't ask that with judgment, because sometimes the risk really is too great to take a chance on saying something. Much of the time, though, I think we feel more constrained by social training and the potential for discomfort than for real harm. A couple of years ago, I was eating outside at a restaurant near here and heard people at a table nearby gushing about a politician whose policies I found abhorrent. As they ignored the person's record, ascribed glowing qualities to the person, and said things that were flat out false, I got angrier and angrier. Eventually, I knew I couldn't be silent anymore. With my voice breaking and every fiber of my introvert self protesting, I went over to their table and pointed out the person's cruelty, especially towards me and the queer people I love. They scoffed, but I wouldn't let them off the hook that easily. My entire body was shaking because I was so upset. And I don't know that my words changed their minds, but I also knew I couldn't just sit there and swallow the poison they were peddling. Silence really does equal death. This is true for those who have gone through trauma of any type. The experiences are bad enough, but the cone of silence, when it surrounds those experiences, can kill your soul. An example that came up in the feedback for this month's theme was the courage it takes to support a family member with serious mental illness. It's just something we don't talk about, and so folks are left to deal with it by themselves or with a small circle of trusted beloveds. Even those in the trusted circle may or may not get what the family is going through. Judgment may rear its head if they don't understand the pervasive impact of mental illness. Frustration with a situation that never improves might push compassion to the side. And in the meantime, the caregiver may be cycling through the process I outlined at the beginning of this sermon. Awareness, fear, deep breathing, probably some more fear, some level of acceptance, action, and in time, if you're very lucky, you might reach liberation through the kind of forgiveness that Adrienne Marie Brown described in today's reading, the kind of forgiveness that seems unimaginable, miraculous, holy, unattainable. Offering and receiving forgiveness both represent acts of courage. Yom Kippur, which begins on the evening of October 4th this year, is the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. It's a day set aside to atone for the sins of the past year and, God willing, literally, have your name sealed in the book of life. However, as Tracy Rich notes, Yom Kippur atones only for sins between man and God, not for sins against another person. To atone for sins against another person, you must first seek reconciliation with that person, righting the wrongs you committed against them if possible. That must all be done before Yom Kippur. In other words, before you can get right with the holy, you need to get right with your fellow human beings. And that's not always easy. It takes courage and vulnerability to own your mistakes. So I'll begin. If I have hurt you in any way over the past year, through something I said or did or failed to say or left undone, I humbly ask your forgiveness. Letting people down and causing harm is never my intention, but sometimes they're the outcome anyway. Please, forgive me. If there's a way for me to make amends, I want to know. And if you've hurt me in some way in the past year, please know that I forgive you. I know many of us are struggling as we try to figure out how to navigate this not actually post-pandemic, but no longer peak pandemic moment. And I don't have any energy to spare for anger or even lingering annoyance. I want us to be in right relationship. And as we talked about earlier, one of the ways we've promised to do so is to work with conflict. I take covenant seriously, as even when it's easier, as Adrienne Marie Brown writes, to occupy our rage without moving into action, without really asking what is needed in that moment. This makes me think of James Baldwin, who said, "I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain." And that's where courage comes in. What is needed in this moment, even if it lays bare our pain or our fear? As Tony Cade Bambara put it, what are we pretending not to know? Can we live into the questions Brown puts to us? What if what is necessary is trusting people beyond their mistakes and shortcomings, trusting their best intentions? Are we strong enough to default to a trust at a community level? What if what is necessary is learning to see family where you have seen enemies? What if what is necessary is not strategy, not plans, not dollars, but unconditional love? Is unconditional love the thing we're pretending not to know? What kind of courage would it take to take that love seriously? In Bless the Imperfect, Meditations for Congregational Leaders, Layla Ibrahim reminds us of why we gather in congregations. Because we are not in church to be with people who want to sing the same music, or rally for the same cause, or attend the same retreats. We are in church to learn to love better. We disagree, we annoy, we flake out on one another, and we worship, we support, we hold, and we affirm one another. This is really only one choice between imperfect community and no community. Again and again, we are called to choose to commit ourselves to building a more just, more diverse, and yet ever messy and imperfect beloved community. It takes courage to know we're going to disappoint each other and to love each other anyway. We make ourselves vulnerable and might well get hurt. But as we learned last Sunday from Brené Brown's research, vulnerability is the birthplace of love and joy and empathy, belonging, innovation, and creativity. We are made to love. Our task, our challenge, our gift is to show up. Amen, and blessed be.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in number 352, Find a Stillness.
Stillness
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, it sounds so simple to show up. And it is simple. It's just not easy. So let us go forth into this beautiful and broken world and show up for each other. Show up for those who need us. Show up for ourselves when we need something. Let us go forth and just see what it might be like to love unconditionally. Let us go, my friends, with courage and with kindness, and be a blessing to the world. Amen.